it's right 8 miles down the road. But to be honest, you can not help the shit.
Go to police station, please. Can I go?
No, you can ride in the squad if they take you.
Fine, fine.
Chill.
Just shut up.
Fucking Uncle Tom piece of shit.
What you got to say? You ain't gonna talk to me like that in my community. No, it's right 8 miles down the road. But to be honest, you can not help the shit.
Go to police station, please. Can I go?
No, you can ride in the squad if they take you.
Fine, fine.
Chill.
Just shut up.
Fucking Uncle Tom piece of shit.
What you got to say? You understand that? You understand me?
Everybody.
Sorry, I'm busy.
It's all good.
Oh my God, they just
Did he say Uncle Tom?
Did he just call him Uncle Tom? Did he literally just say that?
Did he fucking just...
Excuse me, hello, that's not cool. Hi.
I didn't want to talk about how they anti-racist.
Like, yeah, and now we have our first racist incident so far, and it's good shit. Good shit.
Now you see why I won't go over there?
I feel that now. I'm like just sitting here and like this not being able to watch everything that's going on personally. I'm glad the cops haven't. Like,
Wow.
Is he
He's a sergeant.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another Uncle Tom.
Yeah. You should be somewhere else. Out of all the work you do around here, y'all brought him down here in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Unless he's an uncle. You know what I'm talking about, Uncle Tom. You know what I'm talking about. Stand on this side of the line. You should be somewhere else. Yeah, you. Talk about you. Talking about you.
You don't give a fuck.
They might bring that tear gas.
What's the other business? Oh, never mind.
See the stripes on his arm right below the patch?
Yep. I already see it. I already know he's a fraud.
Say, Uncle.
There's been chances on the fucking phone when he's on the block.
Uncle, you couldn't find nowhere else to go today? Uncle? T-O-M?
So while millions celebrated gay pride, a left-wing mob viciously attacked a gay Asian journalist. The Antifa cowards wore masks. Being a mob of mostly pale, flabby basement dwellers, I don't blame them. Yo! A lot of beeping. Andy No ended up in the ER with brain injuries. These Game of Thrones cosplayers also hit him with homemade milkshakes, which may have contained more than just milk. No, an independent journalist, works for the excellent site Quillette. I've interviewed him before about his reporting on hoax hate crimes. Many hate crimes, it turns out, are hoaxes, just like these Antifa thugs being Antifa, they're pro-fascist. So a guy who monitors fake hate becomes the victim of real hate, attacked by scum pretending to be anti-hate. So where was the Portland mayor? Imagine the Joker running Gotham, and you get the picture. The good news, even CNN finally condemned these jokers. I guess that makes up for this.
You can talk about Antifa. I've watched them in the streets protesting in different situations, okay? There are certainly aspects of them that are true to a cause. That is a good cause. They want social justice. They want whatever they want in that context.
So many hacks excuse the violence, including one Hillary staffer who claimed the victim asked for it by filming the protest. I guess that makes all journalists open game. Once again, those who claim to condemn hate egg on the mob. Kate Cronin-Furman, writing from safe downtown London, wrote in the New York Times calling for Border Patrol agents to be doxxed. She didn't post her own home address, of course, but she hopes this shaming will make agents quit their jobs. So, thugs can dox and harass as the media from afar directs the mob. They now rely on intimidation to make their case, perhaps because their words fail them.
Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is an out-of-the-closet socialist. Most of the Democrats in Washington are in-the-closet socialists. But Bernie's out of the closet. He's not even a Democrat. And yet he's leading Hillary Clinton in the Democrat state primaries and so far New Hampshire and Iowa. I mean, we don't know if that'll hold or not. So the Democrat Party has lost its mind altogether. You would think this would be easy pickings for Republicans. They know how to fight them. They know how to juxtapose their position, but they don't. They just keep caving. What do you want to do? Shut down the government? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? Well, we want to get rid of you. Mr. McConnell, another doofus, may I say, with all due respect. So here's Bernie Sanders at Liberty University. It was founded by, who was it? I know who it is. It's in my mind. Jerry Falwell. It's founded by Jerry Falwell. And let's hear what Bernie Sanders has to say. Cut one, go.
What would you do to bring healing and resolution to the issue of racism in our country?
I would hope and I believe that every person in this room today understands that it is unacceptable to judge people, to discriminate against people based on the color of their skin.
Well, let's stop right there. That's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. So why does the federal government do that? And why do liberals want to do more of that? And why do liberals want open borders so other people can come in from the rest of the world and take jobs away from African Americans in this country, in particular, in our inner cities and minority neighborhoods? How come liberals don't speak up against that? You know, Ralph Abernathy did. Ralph Abernathy spoke out against illegal immigration. There was a time when Walter Mondale did the same thing. There was a time when Latino leaders in the United Farm Workers movement spoke out against it. It just amazes me that the Sharptons and so forth embrace, and the Bernie Sanders embrace, unfettered immigration, particularly illegal immigration, poor people coming into this country, going into these communities. That has an effect. Nobody even talks about it, except me, as I have over the years. So Bernie Sanders talks out of both sides of his mouth. Another doofus. Both sides of his mouth. We shouldn't discriminate against people based on the color of their skin. Amen to that. That's Martin Luther King. That's Abraham Lincoln. I get it. That's Frederick Douglass. But that's not Bernie Sanders. That's not the Democrat Party. It never has been the Democrat Party. Go ahead.
And I would also say that as a nation, the truth is that a nation which in many ways was created, and I'm sorry to have to say this, from way back on racist principles, that's a fact, we have come a long way as a nation.
We were not founded on racist principles. I would encourage you to read the Declaration of Independence. You know who read the Declaration of Independence over and over again? You know who read it out loud to the whole world? You know who referred to it repeatedly in the Lincoln-Douglas debates? Well, it wasn't Douglas. It was Lincoln. And in defense of America's founders, there is nothing in the Declaration of Independence that's discriminatory against anybody. Even in the Constitution. Much has been said, too much actually, has been said about race in recent weeks. We have in this country a huge problem. Race mongers, race baiters, race haters. Many of them serve in high public office. Many of them lead the Democrat Party. Many of them have hijacked civil rights organizations or have created their own and have hijacked the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement is not about race baiting. It's not even about one ethnic group or one racial group or another. It's about liberty and justice and due process and equality, not economic equality, not outcomes equality, but equality under the law. I said the other day that the Democrat Party has hijacked the civil rights movement. They've redefined it. The fact is, the Democrat Party needs racism. It needs it in reality. It needs to concoct it if it has to, but it needs it. And as long as they're a Democrat Party, it will exist in truth or in fiction or both. The Democrat Party has gone from defending slavery, defending segregation, obstructing civil rights, to now claiming to embrace civil rights, to promote civil rights, and accuses the Republican Party of doing all the things that the Democrat Party has done and does do. There's an excellent piece at Town Hall by Mona Charen, and she sums it up beautifully. Many issues we know, but the way she sums it up is worth repeating, particularly after 2 to 3 weeks, the outrageous media and the endless propaganda blaring through our radios and TVs, coming from senior Democrat Party officials and Democrat Party supporters dressed up as civil rights leaders and politicians. And she points out, and I had this audio yesterday, and I decided not to play it because Charles Rangel is an unethical, certified unethical, tax avoider, and race baiter. And I said, what the hell? That's wasting 2.5 minutes of airtime on that jerk. But she points out the unsinkable Rangel appeared on C-SPAN over the weekend. Why unsinkable? The House of Representatives censored the New York Democrat in 2010 by a vote of 333 to 79, when that body was still majority Democrat, for violating 11 ethics rules and bringing discredit to the House of Representatives, quote unquote. The New York Times called it a staggering fall for the senior senator, Democrat, but fall schmall. He's since been reelected and will retire at his leisure. So while talking to Brian Lamb, Rangel dropped a few falsehoods as casually as cigar ash. This is what I want to get at. This isn't to pick on Rangel, she writes. He's just illustrative. His assertion that the Republican and Democratic parties changed sides, quote unquote, in the 1960s on civil rights has become conventional wisdom. Now, folks, you hear this all the time yourself. These are lies. These are myths. And they are perpetuated. And you need to stand up to this. She says it's utterly false and should be rebutted at every opportunity. It's true that a Democrat President, Lyndon Johnson, shepherded the 1964 Civil Rights Act to passage. But who voted for it? 80% of Republicans in the House voted yes, as against 61% of Democrats who voted no. Excuse me. I blew that. 87% of Republicans voted yes to only 61% of Democrats who voted yes. In the Senate, 82% of Republicans favored the law, only 69% of Democrats. And among the Democrats who voted against it, Al Gore Jr., Robert Byrd, and William Fulbright. Al Gore Sr., Robert Byrd would become majority leader of the Democrat Party. William Fulbright, Bill Clinton's primary mentor. The Republican presidential candidate in 1964 also opposed the Civil Rights Act. Barry Goldwater had been an enthusiastic backer of the 1957 and the 1960 Civil Rights Acts, both overwhelmingly opposed by Democrats. He was a founding member of the Arizona chapter of the NAACP. He hired many blacks in his family business and pushed to desegregate the Arizona National Guard. And he had a good faith objection to some features of the 1964 Act, writes Charen, which he regarded as unconstitutional. Goldwater was no racist. The same cannot be said of Fulbright, on whom Clinton bestowed the Medal of Freedom. Fulbright was one of 19 senators who signed the Southern Manifesto defending segregation. I've written about this at length myself, but I just want to repeat it. Okay, but didn't all the old segregationist senators leave the Democratic Party and become Republicans after 1964? No. Just one, Strom Thurmond. The rest remained in the Democratic Party, including former Klansman Robert Byrd, who became president pro tem of the Senate. Former racists of both parties renounced their old views. Kevin Williamson of National Review points out Johnson himself voted against anti-lynching laws and poll tax repeals as a senator. And neither party has a perfect record on racial matters by any stretch. But it is a libel to suggest that the Republican Party, the anti-slavery party, the party of Lincoln, and the party that traditionally supported civil rights, anti-lynching laws, and integration became the racist party after 1964. The so-called Solid South Democratic voting pattern began to break not in the 1960s in response to civil rights, but in the 1950s in response to economic development in the Cold War. Black voters in the North, who'd been reliable Republicans, began to abandon the GOP in response to the New Deal, encouraged by certain activists to, quote, turn Lincoln's picture to the wall. That debt had been paid, said Robert Vann. In the 1940s, the GOP garnered about only 25% of Southern votes. The big break came with Dwight Eisenhower's victories. Significant percentages of white Southerners voted for Ike, though the Democratic Party remained firmly segregationist, and though Eisenhower backed 2 civil rights bills and enforced the Brown decision by federalizing the National Guard. They also began to send Republican representatives to the House. So these Republican gains came not from the most rural and deep South regions, but from the newer cities and suburbs. If the new Southern Republican voters were white racists, one would have expected that Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia would have been the first to turn. Instead, as General Alexander notes in The Myth of the Racist Republicans, the turn toward the GOP began in Virginia, North Carolina, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. Eisenhower did best in the peripheral states. And Alexander concludes, the GOP Southern electorate was not rural, nativist, less educated, afraid of changers, concentrated in the Deep South. It was disproportionately suburban, middle-class, educated, young, non-native Southern, and concentrated in the growth points that were the least Southern parts of the South. The point is, folks, Rangel is peddling a libel, and Republicans should say so loudly and often. No, the Republicans didn't change places with the Democrats. Yes, the Democrats have rewritten history and have hijacked the so-called civil rights movement, which now attacks with a broad brush law enforcement, opposes the voting franchise by refusing to support efforts to ensure that only those who can vote will vote, and promotes massive big federal government, socialism and redistribution of wealth, and all those things that are anti-liberty. Because that's what they are. Time for a real doctor, Dr. Ben Carson. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks.
And your book is America the Beautiful, Rediscovering What Made This Nation Great. What made this nation great, in your opinion?
Well, we had policies that encouraged people to work hard. You know, they were the beneficiaries and their families were the beneficiaries. That was one of the things that made us great. We had a country that was for, of, and by the people. The people were the central thing. The government wasn't the central thing. Now it's for, of, and by the government, the very thing that our forefathers feared and tried to keep us from moving toward. And also we were people who had values and principles. We were God-fearing people with Judeo-Christian values, and all of those things seem to be fading from our memories.
You know, they're not only fading from our memories, but if you dare to talk about these things in certain news outlets, you're going to be viciously attacked, and you have been viciously attacked. And I'll be honest with you, I've been watching this from a distance. You and I have never spoken before, right?
That's correct.
I've been watching this from a distance. I read your book. It's superb. Your background is the American dream, and it sort of all comes together in your life. And these attacks on you, I have to ask you, you're a religious man. Do these attacks make you want to speak out more and do more, or do they cause you to second guess coming out and talking like this?
No, they make me recognize what serious trouble we're in. And what has really brought it home to me is, I've gotten so many letters of support or phone calls or emails from people who believe similarly but are afraid to speak out because they think there may be retribution. And basically it proves what I was saying at the National Prayer Breakfast, that political correctness is threatening to destroy our nation because it puts a muzzle over honest conversation. And the fabric of our nation is changed without the benefit of a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right. They don't want a conversation, do they? They don't want us to engage. In fact, they
No, they want to shut us up completely.
Yeah.
And that's why the attacks against me have been so vicious, because I represent, an existential threat to them. They need to shut me up. They need to get rid of me. They can't find anything else to delegitimize me, so they take my words, misinterpret them, and try to make it seem that I'm a bigot.
And you're attacked also in many respects because of your race, because you're not supposed to think like this and talk like this.
Well, they're the most racist people there are, because they put you in a little category, a little box. You have to think this way. How could you dare come off the plantation?
Mm-hmm. Now, you've been on networks like MSNBC. I mean, that's not really a news network. That's just a bunch of leftist hosts who dress up as phony reporters and attack guests they don't like and so forth. Is that something you're going to continue to do? You think are you thinking taking your case to those places is worthwhile?
Well, I'm not afraid of any of them, because, for me it's very easy. All I have to do is tell the truth. I don't have a particular agenda that I'm pushing, so it's going to be pretty difficult for them to trip me up. I'm going to just tell the truth, and I'll tell the truth wherever I go, on a liberal media or on a conservative media. I was there talking about some of the very serious issues that threaten the fabric of our nation, diagnosing a severe problem that is spiritual as well. And some people said, well, why did you bring up, the Bible and God? Duh, it's a prayer breakfast. You can do that. But, it's just so interesting, the way that people think or don't think.
Well, what's amazing to me is we have this Bill of Rights, we have the First Amendment, we have this tradition of free speech, and some of the speech is absolutely awful and horrific. And you speak what are basically about traditional values, traditional principles, the principles that undergird this society and our founding, and somehow this is controversial.
Isn't that amazing? But I'll tell you what also I found fascinating is all of the communications I've gotten from elderly, particularly Americans, who said they had totally given up until now. Now they felt maybe there was just a ray of hope. They thought our country was gone. And a lot of people have been just bludgeoned into silence. It amazes me. Some of the letters I get from students on campuses, they just feel that they can't speak out or they're going to have retribution. It's awful what's going on in our nation. Freedom of speech has been totally forgotten about.
Are you going to be giving that commencement speech or not at Johns Hopkins?
To be determined. It's still up in the air. There were 8 students who signed a petition, and that was not from the graduating class. That was from all the classes. That was what they could come up with. There are others who feel very strongly in the other direction. But, I'm going to wait and see. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, quite frankly, for a university to use a thermometer and to gauge its own feelings toward some of the liberties that are so much expressed in higher education.
I suspect even if you do give that speech, there will be some who try and shout you down, some who may walk out, and some who may do these sorts of things. But that won't deter you, will it?
No. When you're dealing with an entrenched system that does not want to change, and you start doing things that are contrary to its ideological beliefs, believe me, you're going to get some major pushback.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have totally been expecting the pushback and the demonization, totally expecting it. But I don't think it's going to take root because over the course of time, people will see that there's very little to their arguments.
It's amazing how much is done in this country by the federal government against the will of the people or without the knowledge of the people, isn't it?
Well, I'm not sure that the government really cares that much what the people think.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of people were against Obamacare, but, that didn't stop anything from happening. For some strange reason, we've forgotten that the government works for the people and not the people for the government.
Mm-hmm.
And partly it's the fault of the people because, Congress has a 9% approval rating, yet we return people to the office at a rate of 90%. There's a major disconnect there. It means, people go in that booth and they just say, oh, there's a name that looks familiar. Or they just say, there's a D or there's an R, I'll vote for that. That is really shirking one's responsibility. And that's the very thing that the founders of this nation were talking about when they said our system depends on a well-informed and educated populace. And if they ever become something other than that, the nature of the country will change.
What does your family think about all this attention to you?
Well, they're all very supportive. Everyone is supportive. My kids grew up with the same kinds of values, and the things that I talk about, they're value-based things, and I'm never going to give up those things that are personal values and those things that have been advocated by God in the Bible, regardless of what man comes along and says they're okay now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the attitude the founders took and expressed, in among other places, the Declaration of Independence, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of the Declaration of Independence, 5 doctors signed it. And I like to bring that up when people say, you're a doctor, you shouldn't be talking about these things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of shuts them up.
By the way, what about that? It seems like I hear people now saying only governors should run for president, only this, only that. I'm thinking to myself, where did that come from?
Well, I think it's the political class who likes to maintain their power. What you need, really, to govern is wisdom. Wisdom makes a whole lot of sense in these situations. Somebody who can take facts, take data, analyze it, use advisors wisely, and make wise decisions that are good for all the people, not for a particular party or particular special interest groups.
All right, my last question. You are retiring. You had a very prestigious position. You're a world-renowned surgeon, brain surgeon. What in the immediate future do you think you might do?
Well, I've already got 10 international trips scheduled and multiple speaking engagements. Our scholarship fund is continuing to grow. I'm very concerned about the education of our young people. We're putting in reading rooms all over the country, particularly targeting Title I schools where kids come from homes with no books, go to schools with no libraries. Those are the ones who drop out. We can't afford to have that going on in our society, particularly in the information age. So I'm going to be devoting a lot of attention to those kinds of things, and, I'm going to start working on a new book also.
What is the name of your foundation if people want to check it out? CarsonScholarsFund.org. Let's post that, Mr. Producer, on my social sites. And it's a great book. It's America the Beautiful, Rediscovering What Made This Nation Great. And God bless you, my friend. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Same to you.
All right. Take care. Dr. Ben Carson. Well, you've heard him. You've seen him. I've never talked to him before, and I wanted the opportunity, and quite a remarkable man. The people who attack him are your typical dregs of society, may I say.